Thank you so much for having us. And thanks to everyone who is here and present in the audience. I'm Gina Abrams, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Brittany Laughlin, Executive Director of the Stacks Foundation, and Muneeb, Stacks co-founder. It's really incredible to be here today among this group of builders. So, it's been about 1.5 years since the Stacks smart contract layer for Bitcoin went live. This discussion is on Stacks 2.1, as well as the next major upgrades for the network. So to kick things off, I'd love to hear from both of you, starting with Muneeb, on the key learnings from the past 18 months and how they translate to focus areas for Stacks ahead. Muneeb, I'll kick it over to you.
Hey everyone, excited to be here. So I think, Gina, as you said, that with the Mainnet launch last year, some of the key functionality that went live, first of all, it was like smart contracts ability, right? Like Clarity language went live. It was the first time that you have a Bitcoin layer that has decidable contracts. People can actually program things in a very secure way. And really interesting mechanisms like stacking went live, where people are earning a native Bitcoin yield. They can actually see this interaction that they're locking capital on a layer, but their Bitcoin rewards are actually appearing on the main chain. And all of that was very exciting. We saw a bunch of builders coming in, trying to build Bitcoin NFTs, trying to build different applications like Alex and others. And I think in terms of learnings, one thing that is obviously clear is that the network speed and capacity is something that requires more work. And I think there are fundamental things here because being a Bitcoin layer means that in many ways you're tied to Bitcoin block times, which are roughly between 10 to 20 minutes. And there has been a bunch of work going on, two things in parallel. One is around subnets, which people can think of that as a scalability layer where you can do things much faster and kind of like settle through the stacks layer on Bitcoin. And the other is that can we actually crack this issue of just doing more transactions and more blocks in between two Bitcoin blocks. So that's a very exciting thing. That's like probably after Stacks 2.1. There's a bunch of R&D work going on there. And I think the second big thing that stands out is that for a Bitcoin layer, probably one of the most important things is what I've been calling the Bitcoin write problem. Like right now, the contracts on the Stacks layer, they can read information from the main chain, but they can't really write back, right? Or in other words, like you can't really have a Bitcoin derived asset in a trustless way that you can peg in and out of the layer, right? So that's a pretty big area where a bunch of R&D work has been going on, and that is not scheduled for 2.1. We'll discuss what's going into Stacks 2.1 shortly, but those are kind of like the really big two things that are focus areas after 2.1.
Yeah, I think Muneeb hit on a lot of the big things that have happened and that are coming. I think looking back over the past 18 months, it's just been incredible to see the amount of creativity, the amount of new businesses that have started built completely on Stacks. We've had some great NFT projects get launched. We've seen bridges. We've seen DeFi applications. There's just hundreds of ways to use Stacks and very interesting things and what's been great about seeing that is just the amount of utility that comes into our ecosystem. And that just kind of compounds. We've seen, better integrations with exchanges and wallets and custody. That was one of our big goals. And we now have global access to our token. And that means really a global market, not only for people who hold Stacks, but for builders who want to reach Stacks holders, who really want to unleash, the ability to build on Bitcoin to a global scale. And I think that's really important because Bitcoin is the most globally held asset. And so being able to offer new tools and services to anyone worldwide who already knows Bitcoin is something that we've dreamed about and we're seeing become a reality in a really big way. So we're really excited about what's yet to come. We know that with some of the upgrades, there's even more functionality. So maybe you've never held Stacks before, but you've held Bitcoin, you believe in Bitcoin, and you want to do more with it. That is the thing that entrepreneurs in our ecosystem are working on. And at the foundation, we're really excited to be able to offer more grants, more programs like the Mint Tree, where we help creators mint NFTs on Bitcoin directly, very easily. So I think there's just a lot of stuff that's been building, and we're going to see next year as really the year of building on Bitcoin.
Excellent. Thank you both. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into Stacks 2.1 and the immediate upgrades ahead. Brittany, I'll hand it off to you to start this one.
Yeah, so Stacks 2.1 is a really exciting upgrade, especially for builders. It focuses on building better connections into Bitcoin. That includes things like better writing in with Taproot, better bridges, more functionality, better UX for any people who are holding stacks or building with stacks. And then I think one of the things we've heard a lot of stacks holders excited about is just continuous stacking. So if you're already a stacker, you're already earning maybe a 9% annual yield in Bitcoin for locking in your stacks. But you often have these cooldown periods where you kind of have to wait a cycle, you miss those rewards. So with continuous stacking, this will be a better experience and also just mean more APY for your Bitcoin. So we're really excited to see how builders use that, and then also how stackers get excited about that additional yield.
Great. And Muneeb, is there anything else you'd highlight in terms of the connection to Bitcoin and what Stacks 2.1 unlocks that you're excited about?
Yeah, I think Brittany mentioned continuous stacking. That's obviously a pretty big feature that everyone was asking about, because it makes stacking more programmable, because now people can control when they're unlocking capital more clearly, and there isn't this like cooldown period that they have to worry about. So a lot of builders were actually really asking for that functionality. And I think there's also another update, like most people probably don't even know about this, but there was actually there was a security corner case that people were worried about before the mainnet launch, due to which there was actually a sunset period. Like, we are always very concerned about safety first. And now stacking has kind of like proven out in the market and in the real world setting enough that sunset period is being removed, meaning that stacking is here, it's working, and there are many other improvements that are kind of like baked into the improved contract for POX that's kind of like going live. Brittany also mentioned like Taproot support. I think that's great. So other than SegWit, we'll have Taproot support as well, which actually unlocks programming functionality on the Bitcoin side. So Stacks, the Bitcoin layer, is all about the interaction of the main layer and main chain and the Bitcoin layer. So if Stacks supports Taproot and people want to actually write sophisticated scripts in Taproot and publish that on the main chain, that unlocks a lot of functionality. There are a host of features that are going live. A lot of them are like very developer focused. So there are certain things that the developers want to do. Let's say they wanted to query Bitcoin blocks or other types of information from the Bitcoin chain. I think those types of things are going live with 2.1 as well. So I think people should think of that as like it's actually a combination of a lot of hard work that happened over the last 12 to 16 months. And a lot of those goodies are packaged in Stacks 2.1 along with the major things that we discussed.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to add to that is that all of these improvements have come from the community. Requests, for different functionality, improvements in UX, the vote to say, we want stacking you to stay, we don't want to sunset it. So this is part of our SIPS process. This is open to everyone in the community. Everyone has an opportunity to write a proposal of things you would like to see changed, as well as vote on this upcoming proposal. So none of these updates go live without voting, without the community. So we'd love to have you guys more involved, whether you're a stacker or you're just getting involved. That's how these improvements get made. And that's why what you heard from Muneeb, these are all things that developers have been wanting or Stacks holders have wanted. It's because that's the way these upgrades happen.
Yeah, and I think I should add one more thing, that a lot of people are obviously looking at the network performance and how many transactions are happening and what are the scalability things. So 2.1 sort of helps with that as well, in the sense that there's like new clarity features that are going live. People can write more optimized smart contracts that can actually, you can package more information in existing blocks. So just like we've seen some improvements to the how much transactions are getting packed on existing blocks, even with the recent upgrades that happen. 2.1 also helps there. So we don't have to, it's not like everyone's kind of like waiting for subnets or the next major improvement that happens. A lot of stuff can be done even before that. And 2.1 is going to help move the needle along these dimensions as well.
Thank you so much. We covered a lot of ground there. I wanted to sort of double click into one of the items you mentioned, Muneeb, in terms of Taproot support. I think that some of the upgrades that 2.1 helps with assist with things like implementing mining pools, et cetera. And so I'm curious about how do you see 2.1 and upgrades beyond 2.1 really feeding into sort of miner decentralization? And also, what's the cadence that a community can sort of rally to see these network upgrades?
Yeah, I think miner decentralization is a pretty real thing. There have been many community discussions around it. I think there are multiple SIP proposals that are floating around for miner decentralization. And I think Maddie, who's a resident at the Stacks Foundation, has done some analysis as well. So I think I'm actually pretty excited about it, but because in one of his analysis, at least there's one set, the dust mining one, where the number of miners would go up to like 30 plus even today, just with the dust mining work. And I think that is something worth following up. That is not something that is currently planned for Stacks 2.1. But again, as Brittany mentioned, there's a set process through which the community can come together and work on it. The thing that is going live with 2.1 is better support for mining pools. And I think that could help a lot as well, because it's not just like we want to increase the number of independent miners that are there, but that you can have like trustless pools, and a lot of people can participate in those trustless pools, which actually helps with miner decentralization as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for those folks who aren't familiar with Stacks mining, you don't need an expensive, hardware setup at home. Instead, it uses Bitcoin. So if you hold Bitcoin, you can become a miner, you can contribute, and you can actually earn stacks for being a miner. So I think the focus for mining pools is that how do we allow more people to be involved in that process and make it really easy? That strengthens the network, it adds to the security budget, and it gives a great way to get exposure to stacks if you are interested in having more.
Excellent, thank you. Now, we have touched on sort of the network efficiency and, really unlocking that in future upgrades. Is there anything else that you'd want to add in terms of that conversation that people can really get excited for and sort of see live on GitHub and help contribute to as well? Muneeb, anything that you want to add in that dimension?
Yes, I think, as I mentioned, that a lot of this experience around Bitcoin, like there's a long history of this, right? Like people have tried building new functionality directly on the Bitcoin base layer as well. If you think about counterparties that started NFTs or early versions of BNS, where people are registering domain names directly on Bitcoin, everyone had to wait for these 10 to 20 minutes before the transaction can get processed. And if you're doing a ton of transactions, like thousands and thousands of transactions, you are filling up the mempool of the main Bitcoin chain, right? Similarly, I think like transaction fees spike up when you're trying to do these things. So over time, it's like abundantly clear that scalability and new functionality is going to come to Bitcoin through Bitcoin layers like Lightning or Stacks or others that are adding this functionality. But most of these things are still limited by Bitcoin's block times. So one of the key things that I've been personally doing more research work on, along with a lot of really bright minds in the ecosystem, is that how do we crack that fundamental problem that where you don't have to wait for Bitcoin block times. Like right now, the Stacks blocks are tied to Bitcoin blocks. A Stacks block happens when a Bitcoin block happens. And if you can actually do more blocks and more transactions in between two Bitcoin blocks, that basically is the holy grail solution, right? Like, because then all of those transactions can settle on Bitcoin, and Bitcoin really becomes like the settlement layer. So people can have much more reliable block times where, pick whatever is a good UX experience, but then it's like Bitcoin blocks are also variable, right? Like it's not just that they take long, you also don't know there isn't a guarantee that, let's say, every 5 seconds there is going to be. But you can get there. You can get there to a Bitcoin layer like Stacks. And that is obviously going to be a major consensus upgrade. But there's already kind of like, interesting kind of like breakthroughs and work towards it that I'm actually spending a bunch of my time these days on some of these consensus upgrades.
Yeah, we actually just hosted an ecosystem offsite kind of talking about these priorities. And I think the biggest rallying cry from the community is deeper connection to Bitcoin and speed and scalability. So those two are the highest priority across the ecosystem. We're getting a number of those improvements in 2.1, but the real work is currently in development. There will be some designs that will be shared with the public. I know the blockchain engineering team is working hard on those, but I think to Muneeb's point that we can help scale Bitcoin and we can help scale apps that want to build on Bitcoin. Subnets are coming in Q1. That's a really exciting update. All of these neat things like GameFi or instant transactions, those come with another layer. And so being able to open that up to more developers, I think is really exciting. I know existing builders in our community are already using the testnet for Subnets. So if you want to check that out, definitely do. But I do think this speed and scalability of the main chain is our core priority and something that's in the works, in the development, and you'll see a lot more updates about this very soon. We just recently sort of doubled the number of blockchain engineers in our ecosystem. It's likely we'll double that again. So if you're looking to join us, definitely there's some open roles across the ecosystem. But I think this just adds more capacity to ship these big upgrades sooner. So we're really excited to see what comes out of that and what people can build with these new updates in the next month or two, and then not even 6 months away for Subnets coming in Q1, see what we can build that.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing that given how decentralized this ecosystem is, it is really not the case that there is any single company that is responsible for pushing forward any improvements on the blockchain. This is really a decentralized ecosystem. Think of that as how the Linux kernel is open source software, and there are many businesses that have a business interest in trying to kind of like push new features to the Linux kernel. And that's how this ecosystem is evolving, which can mean that sometimes things are slower. But I do think that in the last 2 months or so, various different businesses and entities are kind of like tackling that challenge head on. That yes, there is a lot of overhead when 11 different companies are trying to kind of like contribute to open source software. So how can we be more efficient? And I think there is this structure of working groups where you can be a part of a very specific thing that you want to see improved, and then collaborate across different entities and work in an open source way. And I think those are kind of like growing pains. As an open source project, like if you once learn how to be very efficient across multiple entities, I think then in terms of long-term sustainability, that's a very strong thing, right? Because you're not dependent on any single company. It's an ecosystem, it's a decentralized open source project, and we've figured out how to be efficient in that decentralized setting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I think, just adding to that, like there's already this awesome NFT working group that's been thinking about, better Bitcoin NFTs, sending, airdropping NFTs to people's Bitcoin wallets, some really cool stuff that's coming. And that's all self-organized. There's a number of community members who've helped put that together and are pushing that forward. The other shout out I have to give is to Hiro Gamer. If you don't follow him on Twitter yet, please do. He's our SIP resident. He's the one who's collecting feedback from the community, letting people know when there's new SIPs, when there's new proposals of what people want to see. So definitely check out his feed and let him know if you have any ideas, because that's a great way to get, turn ideas into code in the Stacks blockchain.
Thank you so much. We've covered a lot of ground here in terms of all the upgrades ahead. Muneeb, last 30 seconds, anything you want to touch on in terms of just the opportunity and what you'd like to see over the next 2 years for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think overall, if we zoom out, I think it's okay to admit that all of the Bitcoin layers, Lightning, Stacks, RSK, Liquid, everything combined is relatively at an early stage. If you look at some of the rest of the industry, like if you look at how many developers there are on Ethereum or some of the newer chains. And I think that's fine because there are challenges on the Bitcoin side in terms of dev tooling, infrastructure, even capital. But I think the Bitcoin thesis is that the opportunity on the Bitcoin side is also larger, right? Like there's more capital that can get unlocked. Bitcoin is actually decentralized and grassroots, and this is a thing that is durable and would be here for a very long time. And if you look at the scenario, and if you're an entrepreneur, or even if you want to deploy capital, like you want to run towards where the puck is going, right? And where there's opportunity that is yet to be unlocked. And I think Bitcoin layers are definitely one of those places where there's a ton of work to do and a ton of opportunity and a ton of potential that can be unlocked. So it's a call out to all of the builders that if you want to do really interesting things in the Bitcoin ecosystem, like some of the challenges might be getting solved, and this might be the right time to start looking into Bitcoin layers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know we're at time, but I just want to add to that. If you are a builder, we have grants, we have free education for clarity, we have a great community. So if you aren't sure where to start, or if you have an idea that you want to kick off, come to stacks.org. We have a ton of great resources to help you take that idea, put it into reality, and be part of this next wave of Bitcoin innovation.
Thank you so much, Muneeb and Brittany, for being here today, sharing your thoughts, and obviously this community for making it all happen. I'll hand it back to you, Kyle.
Thanks a lot.